Welcome. At the Parents Place of Maryland, the foundation of our work is our mission. And our mission is to empower families as advocates and partnering in improving education and health outcomes for all children, individuals with disabilities, special healthcare needs, and those impacted by behavior health challenges. We have had several families ask, what are endorsements? I'm getting information from my young adult school about endorsements and I don't understand it. Our families have asked and we are here to deliver. Hello, my name is Marlo Lemon and I'm Co-Deputy Director of Training and Strategic Partnerships at the Parents Place of Maryland. And I am pleased to welcome with us today Dr. Tatum Williams, who is the Secondary Transition Performance Specialist from the Division of Special Education at the Maryland State Department of Education, to join us today and share information about the Maryland Certificate of Program Completion endorsement. So welcome, Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Marlo. I'm really glad to be here. I always appreciate opportunities to talk with families about secondary transition planning and the work that's happening across Maryland to support young adults as they prepare for life after high school. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk a little bit today about the Maryland Certificate of Program Completion endorsements and how they connect to secondary transition planning.
Thank you so much. So our format today, if you don't mind, will just be Q&A. So I'll ask you some questions that we've received from families. So the first question I'm going to start off with is, what are the Maryland Certificate of Program Completion endorsements and how are the competencies determined?
Yeah, Marla, that's a great place to begin because for many families, one of the biggest questions nearing the end of high school is, what will people know about my young adult beyond the certificate itself? And that's really the purpose of the Maryland Certificate of Program Completion endorsements, because they were developed to help describe how a student is preparing for life after high school. So while the certificate recognizes completion of a student's educational program, the endorsements help communicate the specific skills, experiences, and readiness students have developed along the way. And the structure is fairly straightforward. You can think about it as endorsements, standards, and competencies. So the endorsement represents a broad area of preparation for adult life. And within that are standards, and those standards include competencies, which are the specific skills and experiences students demonstrate over time. This is a competency-based approach, which means the focus is on what students have learned and experienced rather than simply completing classes. And when determining what endorsement and competencies are most appropriate, the Individualized Education Program, or IEP team, reviews several important pieces of information. So that includes the student's strengths, interests, and preferences, because those areas are essential to meaningful secondary transition planning. The team will also review the student's post-secondary goals, which includes employment, education or training, and independent living. The most important thing families should know is that nothing is decided without discussion. Endorsements are identified by the IEP team, and they are centered around the student's voice with input from families, educators, and sometimes other stakeholders who support the student. Most importantly, endorsements are individualized, just like your young adult's IEP, because they reflect the student's goals, experience, and growth.
Thank you so much for that. So now that I'm thinking about it, why should my young adult earn the endorsement? What are the benefits?
Yeah, that's another really important question families ask, because they want to understand how endorsements actually help their young adult as they prepare to leave school. And one of the greatest benefits is that endorsements provide clarity. They offer documented evidence of readiness as students prepare to transition from high school into adult life. And in many ways, they help answer a question families and adult service providers often ask, which is, what is the student ready to do next? Endorsements help highlight those skills and experiences a student has developed, and they show how those experiences connect to the student's goals for the future. So whether a young adult is planning to pursue employment, continue their education or training, or just become more involved in their community, endorsements help illustrate how the student has been preparing for those next steps. They also provide a clear, organized record of competency attainment, showing that the student has developed specific skills that support their transition to adult life. And these competencies may reflect things like work-based learning experiences, communication and self-advocacy skills, participation in community activities, or just other opportunities to build independence. And this can be especially helpful because the certificate itself doesn't always fully communicate the range of abilities a student has developed during their time in school. Endorsements help add that context and value to those recognitions by highlighting the experiences and the practical skills students have gained along the way. Another important benefit is that endorsements help strengthen coordination between schools and adult agencies. And when students transition out of school, agencies and service providers often want to understand the student's strengths, experiences, and areas where additional support may be helpful. The endorsements help to organize that information so it can be easily shared and understood. They also provide shared language around readiness and skills so that schools, families, and agencies can all refer to that same framework when discussing a student's experiences and preparation for the future. That shared understanding can make it easier to work together in supporting the student's transition. So I would say ultimately, endorsements help ensure that when young adults leave school, they don't just leave with a certificate. They leave with recognized experiences, documented skills, and a clear picture of the strengths they bring with them as they move into the next stage of their life. And it helps others better understand what they're capable of and the progress they've made as they prepare for what comes next.
Thank you. So, what information can we expect from the school? Um, what should the discussion look like at the IEP table?
Yeah, another great question. So families can expect schools to share clear information and resources to help guide these discussions. So these conversations should feel very familiar because they build on discussions that are already part of secondary transition planning. The primary resource provided to families is the Maryland Certificate of Program Completion Endorsement rubric. And this helps organize conversations around the competencies students may demonstrate during their time in school. Families should also receive a parent information letter, and that provides an overview of endorsements and explains how they help support their young adult success after high school. And both of these resources, the attainment rubric and the parent letter, are also located on the Maryland State Department of Education's website. And they really help families understand how competencies are considered and how they support secondary transition planning. Now, for the IEP meeting, it's important to know that endorsements discussions support and organize conversations that are already happening as part of secondary transition planning. So during these meetings, teams may discuss, the skills the student has already demonstrated and the skills that they are currently working on. Some of that information may be reflected in parts of the IEP, like the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, or PLAF. From there, the conversation focuses on how instruction and school experiences connect to adult life and support the students' post-secondary goals. For example, they might talk about work-based learning, community experiences, or the development of self-advocacy and independent living skills. And as with any discussion around supports and services, families should always expect clear explanations in everyday language. They should be given time to ask questions and opportunities to share their priorities and insights about their young adult. It's important to understand that endorsements and competencies are reviewed and discussed over time, and they evolve as students grow and gain new experiences. The documentation that comes out of these discussions reflects the team's shared understanding and decisions and ensures that everyone involved is working toward that same goal.
Another big question, will earning an endorsement impact my young adults DDA funding?
Mm, yeah, this is a question we hear frequently, and it's an
Mhm.
important one. Earning an endorsement does not reduce or jeopardize eligibility or funding through the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration, or DDA. And this is because endorsements are school-based recognitions, while DDA eligibility and funding decisions are determined through DDA's own processes and criteria. So families can feel confident that earning an endorsement will not negatively impact their young adults' eligibility. In fact, endorsements can be helpful when determining services because they provide that clear documentation of skills, experiences, and those areas where ongoing support may be helpful.
Okay, final question. How can endorsements help my young adult prepare for employment and life after high school?
I'm so glad you asked. One of the most meaningful ways endorsements can help prepare adults or young adults for adulthood is by connecting school experiences to the expectations they'll encounter in adult life. So let's break it down simply. There are three domains of secondary transition planning: education and training, employment, and independent living. And these domains ensure students are prepared for post high school life through individualized goal planning and coordinated activities. And the endorsements help highlight preparation across each of those areas. So, for students who plan to continue education and training, endorsements highlight those skills that they developed that support learning after high school. So, that might include things like self advocacy, organization, communication, or participating in career and technical education experiences. Those experiences can support the skills students need to succeed in environments such as inclusive post-secondary education programs or career training programs or other post-secondary opportunities. When it comes to employment, endorsements help document experiences that connect school to real workplace expectations. So students may participate in job exploration activities, school-based enterprises, or community work experience. And these experiences help students develop and generalize soft skills. For example, communication, time management, teamwork, problem solving. And when those experiences are documented, it can help students highlight their abilities and strengths when they are creating resumes, participating in job interviews, or even meeting with employers. So the endorsements can also help complement services provided by adult agencies, such as the Division of Rehabilitation Services, or DOORS, which works with individuals with disabilities to prepare for and obtain employment. Now, the third domain, independent living, focuses on the skills students need to participate in and navigate their communities more independently. So this can include experiences like using public transportation, accessing community resources, managing personal responsibilities, or participating in community activities. These experiences are important because they help students build confidence and independence as they transition into adult life. And when you look at all of these domains together, education, training, employment, and independent living, endorsements help create a clear record of the experiences and skills students have developed and continue to work on. So, if there's one message families should take away from this discussion today, it's that endorsements are designed to help make the progress and preparation young adults develop during school more visible and easier to communicate as they move into adult life. And they support those conversations about a student's strengths and experiences and emphasize that this work is part of a continuum of growth. It's not the end of the journey, but just one step along the way. And young adults can carry that recognition of their skills and accomplishments with greater confidence as they move into employment, continue learning, and their communities.
Dr. Williams, thank you so much for taking the time Thank you for partnering with the Parents Place of Maryland. Thank you and the secondary team. This information will be so helpful not only to our families, to myself and so many others, because it will help us, it helps us to understand the Maryland Certificate of Completion endorsement. So I thank you so much.
Yeah, and I want to thank you again, Marlo, and the team at the Parents Place of Maryland for the important work you do supporting families and for creating spaces like this where families can learn more about secondary transition planning and those resources available to support their young adults. Conversations like these are incredibly important because families are such an essential part of the secondary transition process. So when schools and families and community partners work together, we can help ensure that young adults leave school with the skills, experiences, and supports they need to move confidently into that next chapter of their lives. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this work and to connect with families across Maryland.
Thank you so much. And to all of our families, all of the information and resources that Dr. Williams discussed can be found on our website, ppmd.org. Thank you very much.